I'm Cassidy Monroe, and I've spent the last 8 years serving in the U.S. Army, 3 deployments, 2 medals, and more scars than I care to count. But nothing prepared me for my sister's wedding. I came home thinking I could finally be part of my family again. Instead, I was told I wasn't pure enough to wear white. That was the moment I made a choice, not just about a dress, but about no longer hiding who I am. So I walked down the aisle, not in chiffon, but in full uniform. And that decision shattered the illusion of our picture-perfect family, for better or worse. Before I share the full story, let me know where you're watching from and hit like if you've ever felt like you had to shrink yourself to keep the peace. Because this isn't just a wedding story. It's about reclaiming your place, even when you were never invited to stand tall. We grew up in Willow Creek, Vermont, in this picture-perfect colonial house. Seriously, it looked like it belonged on a postcard. My father would repaint the white picket fence every single spring, religiously, as if to reinforce the facade of our ideal American family. From the outside, we were the Monroes, polite, successful, impeccable. But inside those walls, the Monroe sisters couldn't have been more different. Brooke was born 3 years before me, and from the day she arrived, she was the family's golden child. My mother, bless her heart, never tired of telling stories at family gatherings about how Brooke apparently slept through the night at 2 weeks old. Me? I was the colicky baby who kept them up at night, the one who always seemed to defy expectations from the get-go. Even then, the contrast was stark. As we grew up, those differences didn't just become pronounced, they became defining. By age 7, Brooke was already a seasoned pro. She was winning beauty pageants with her natural blonde curls and a dimpled smile that could charm anyone. Her room was a shrine to trophies and ribbons. Her report cards were consistently straight A's, effortlessly attained. She played violin in the youth orchestra, filling our home with classical melodies. And she always remembered to say please and thank you, without being prompted. A little polite robot in a frilly dress. My mother adored it, dressing Brooke in layers of lace and patent leather shoes. And Brooke, to her credit, seemed to love every minute of it. She thrived in that spotlight, that expectation of perfection. Then there was me. I inherited my father's unruly dark hair, the kind that refused to lie flat no matter how much product you put in it, and his equally stubborn personality. While Brooke was practicing her pageant wave, I was climbing trees in my Sunday dresses, tearing the lace and staining the fabric with grass. I asked too many questions in church, challenging the Sunday school teacher with uncomfortable truths that made my mother wince. And given the choice between playing with dolls and catching frogs, the frogs won every time. My report cards were a predictable litany of concerns. Cassidy is bright but needs to apply herself. Or, Cassidy challenges authority too often. It felt like a constant refrain. Why can't you be more like your sister? Became the unwelcome soundtrack of my childhood. Every time Brooke received another award, another compliment, another pat on the back, I'd see my mother's eyes shift to me, that familiar look of disappointment clouding them. It was a silent accusation, a question of why I couldn't just fit. When Brooke was 16 and I was 13, she reached the pinnacle of her pageant career, or so it seemed. She was crowned Miss Teen Willow Creek. I remember sitting in the audience, wedged between my beaming parents, clapping until my hands actually hurt. Brooke glided across the stage in a sparkly blue gown, answering questions about world peace and community service with a practiced perfection that felt almost alien to me. She looked like a fairy tale, and I felt like a troll. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, the house was quiet. I crept into Brooke's room, drawn by a strange curiosity. There, on her dresser, was her shimmering tiara. I picked it up, cold metal against my fingertips, and placed it on my head, studying my reflection in her ornate vanity mirror. I tried to imagine myself in her shoes, tried to understand the appeal of being judged for your looks and your carefully rehearsed answers. Brooke caught me, of course. I expected anger, a lecture about boundaries, but instead, she just stood behind me, her reflection appearing beside mine. She reached out, surprisingly gently, and adjusted the tiara on my head. "You could do pageants too, you know," she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I shook my head immediately. "Nah, not my thing." "Because you're afraid you wouldn't win?" she pressed, her voice softer than I expected. "No," I said, removing the tiara and placing it back on the dresser. "Because I don't want to be judged on how I look or how well I can pretend to care about whatever cause is trending that week." Brooke's smile faded then, replaced by a flicker of hurt. "That's not fair, Cassidy. I do care about my platform." "I know," I replied, the truth simple and unvarnished. "We're just different," and we truly were. Throughout high school, Brooke continued her meticulously planned ascent. She dated the captain of the debate team, maintained her perfect 4.0 GPA, and was accepted early decision to Princeton University. She was the embodiment of the life plan our parents had outlined for her since birth. Meanwhile, I got decent grades, mostly without trying too hard, just enough to keep the parental lectures at bay. Weekends found me hiking alone in the vast woods surrounding Willow Creek, finding solace in the silence of the trees. And I dated a guy in a local indie band, a musician with tattoos and a rebellious streak that my parents absolutely hated. I questioned everything, every unspoken rule, every expectation. Brooke followed the map. I wanted to burn it. The real breaking point, the moment that cleaved our lives irrevocably, came during my senior year of high school. While my classmates stressed over college applications, poring over brochures and writing endless essays, I was meeting with a military recruiter. I kept it a secret, a carefully guarded rebellion, until the papers were signed, sealed, and delivered. I didn't want any interference, any last-minute attempts to sway me from my chosen path. When I finally told my family, it was over dinner. I remember the clinking of silverware, the polite hum of conversation, before I dropped the bombshell. I'd enlisted in the Army. My mother dropped her fork with a clatter, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. "You did what?" she whispered, her face pale, drained of color. My father, usually so composed, so stoic, actually knocked over his water glass, sending a small wave across the pristine tablecloth. But it was Brooke's reaction that cut the deepest, deeper than any disappointment from my parents could have. She looked at me, her gaze a horrifying mix of pity and outright disgust. "You're throwing your life away," she said, her voice sharp with accusation. "All that potential just wasted." "It's not wasted," I argued, my own voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I'll be serving my country, getting training, seeing the world." "Getting yourself killed," Brooke interrupted, her eyes wide with a fear I didn't yet understand. Or worse. That night set the tone for the next decade of our relationship, or what was left of it. When I left for basic training, Brooke was starting her junior year at Princeton. She didn't come to see me off. My parents did, standing stiffly at the bus station, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, while my father awkwardly patted my shoulder. "We still love you," he said, his voice strained, as if I'd committed a crime rather than chosen a career path. It wasn't the send-off I'd imagined, but it was all I got. During my deployments, Brooke's communication was sporadic at best. I'd get occasional emails, brief updates on her glamorous life, graduate school at Columbia, meeting Liam, the perfect match from a family with connections and old money, her job at a prestigious marketing firm. She never asked about my experiences. Never once did she inquire about what it was like, about the places I'd seen, the things I'd done. It was as if acknowledging my military service would somehow make it more real to her, more dangerous, more disappointing. When I came home between deployments, family gatherings were tense, brittle affairs. Brooke would dominate conversations with stories about her dazzling Manhattan life, her latest high society gala, her career triumphs. My parents would ask carefully curated questions about my job, always avoiding any mention of danger or combat, as if keeping those words unspoken would keep me safe. It felt like I was living a parallel life, one that they were simply trying to ignore. Pas pour. It's so, when Brooke's wedding invitation arrived in that elegant envelope, with that handwritten note asking me to be her maid of honor, I was genuinely surprised. I reread the note several times, wondering if it was some kind of elaborate prank. I called her immediately, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. "Are you sure?" I asked, after, of course, profusely thanking her. "Of course I'm sure, Cassidy," Brooke said, but there was a distinct hesitation in her voice, a slight wobble that I immediately picked up on. "You're my sister, it's just we haven't exactly been close, have we?" That's why this is important, she quickly added, as if correcting herself. Liam thinks family should be central at weddings, and his family is very traditional, you know. Ah, there it was, the real reason. Liam's family, the Hayes, expected a sister to be maid of honor, and Brooke was doing what was expected. Not out of genuine desire for reconciliation, but out of obligation, out of a need to maintain appearances. Still, I chose to see it differently. I saw it as an opportunity, a fragile thread to repair our relationship. I requested leave, booked my flight, and even bought a new dress for the engagement party, a simple navy blue number, elegant and understated, that I thought couldn't possibly offend anyone. I was wrong. I arrived back in Willow Creek 2 weeks before the wedding, settling into my old bedroom. It had been converted into a home office, complete with a pull-out couch that offered minimal comfort. My mother had left a vase of fresh peonies on the desk, their delicate scent filling the room, along with a small card. It read, "Welcome home, Harper." Not Cassidy, Harper. As if I were returning from a semester abroad. A temporary excursion, rather than my third tour of duty. The disconnect was immediate, palpable. That first evening, Brooke and Liam hosted a dinner with his parents, Judge Arthur Hayes and Patricia Hayes, at the Blackwood Manor Club. It was a place so exclusive, so discreet, that the building didn't even have a sign, just a subtle crest on an unmarked door. We pulled up in Liam's gleaming luxury car, the club's imposing stone facade casting long shadows. Judge Arthur Hayes, Liam's father, was a formidable presence, a federal judge whose reputation preceded him. Patricia, his mother, exuded old money, her family name emblazoned on buildings across New England, a silent testament to their deep roots and immense wealth. They greeted me with polite smiles, perfectly choreographed, that somehow didn't quite reach their eyes. Their gazes lingered a beat too long on my military short hair. A silent assessment, a subtle judgment. "So, you're in the service," Patricia said, her voice smooth as silk, yet managing to make it sound as if I worked as a gas station attendant. A temporary inconvenience. "Army," I clarified, my voice steady. 8 years now." "How interesting," she replied, her tone dripping with thinly veiled condescension, before swiftly turning her attention back to Brooke, asking about the floral arrangements for the rehearsal dinner. It was a dismissal, cold and efficient. Liam himself was pleasant enough, though in his tailored suit and with his carefully cultivated corporate vocabulary, he seemed more like a character from a movie about Wall Street than a real, breathing person. He was handsome, charming, impeccably groomed, the perfect partner for Brooke's curated life. Brooke glowed beside him, laughing at all his jokes, touching his arm whenever she spoke. A vision of happiness. And despite everything, despite the underlying tension and the subtle jabs, her happiness mattered to me. It truly did. The real trouble, as these things often do, began the very next day. It was the first dress fitting. Brooke had chosen a bridal boutique in an upscale town nearby, a place called Serafina's Bridal Emporium. It served champagne and crystal flutes, had a 3-month waiting list, and felt less like a shop and more like a temple to haute couture. The other bridesmaids were already there when we arrived. 3 of Brooke's sorority sisters, all with the same highlighted hair, the same designer handbags, and the same practiced way of air-kissing each other's cheeks while complimenting outfits they probably secretly hated. And then there was Liam's sister, Jillian, who seemed to be their unspoken leader. Cassidy, they chorused, a wave of forced enthusiasm washing over me as I walked in with Brooke. It was that peculiar tone people use when greeting someone they've heard problematic things about. A brittle politeness that barely masked their curiosity. "Everyone, this is my sister," Brooke announced, as if they hadn't just used my name, as if I were a novelty rather than a sibling. "Thank you for your service," one of the sorority sisters chirped. Her name was Amber, or maybe Ashley. I couldn't keep them straight. "We're so glad you could get leave for this," added another, her voice overly sweet. "Brooke was worried you might be, deployed." I smiled tightly, a practiced grimace. Wouldn't miss it. The bridesmaid dresses Brooke had chosen were blush pink, with off-shoulder necklines and flowing chiffon overlays. They were delicate, ethereal, utterly unlike anything I usually wore. When I emerged from the dressing room, the soft fabric feeling foreign against my skin, Brooke frowned immediately. "We need to do something about those," she said. pointing directly at the visible scars on my right shoulder. They were souvenirs, battlefield souvenirs, from an ID that had caught our convoy in Helmand Province. "I can wear a shawl," I offered, trying to be accommodating, trying to diffuse the tension that was already beginning to coil in my stomach. "And your posture, Cassidy," Brooke continued, as if I hadn't spoken, as if my words were irrelevant. "You stand like a soldier. Try to look softer, and we'll definitely need extensions for your hair for the photos." For the next hour, I stood still, a mannequin of sorts, as the boutique staff pinned and tucked the dress. Brooke hovered, directing them, instructing them to hide my flaws, to make me conform to her vision of perfection. The other bridesmaids watched, sipping their champagne, a mixture of embarrassment and fascination on their faces. Occasionally, they offered unhelpful suggestions. "Maybe long gloves," Jillian proposed, her voice perfectly modulated. "In June," I replied, forcing a laugh to hide my growing irritation, the resentment beginning to simmer beneath my carefully constructed composure. It felt like a public dissection, a performance designed to erase any trace of the woman I had become. As the days progressed, the pressure mounted. I found myself constantly biting my tongue, a physical effort to hold back the sharp retorts that constantly sprang to mind. I attended bridal luncheons where the conversation revolved entirely around designer labels I'd never heard of, a world so far removed from my own that it felt like a foreign planet. I sat through endless planning meetings where Brooke agonizingly debated the difference between blush and bashful for the table linens, a triviality that felt monumental to her. I nodded politely as Patricia Hayes explained with unwavering authority why the ceremony absolutely couldn't include any modern elements, because tradition was sacred. Through it all, I made compromises. I agreed to the hair extensions, allowing stylists to transform my military crop into a cascade of loose curls that felt foreign and heavy against my neck. I practiced softer posture in front of my bedroom mirror, trying to mimic the delicate stance Brooke preferred, trying to erase the ingrained discipline of years of military training. I kept my opinions to myself when Brooke rejected the cake flavor I suggested, because it wasn't sophisticated enough. I was determined. I was going to be the supportive sister, the accommodating bridesmaid, no matter what. I wanted this to work. Then came the rehearsal dinner planning. I was helping my mother address place cards, the elegant script a stark contrast to the rough feel of military forms, when Brooke stormed into the dining room, clutching her phone like a weapon. "Did you tell Claire you're wearing a cream dress to the rehearsal dinner?" she demanded, her voice tight with indignation. Claire was one of the bridesmaids, the one with the unnaturally white teeth who kept touching my arm when she talked to me, as if testing to see if I was real. "It's not cream, it's a crew," I corrected, my voice calm despite the sudden jolt of adrenaline. "And it's the only nice dress I brought besides the one for the wedding. It's elegant, tasteful." "You can't wear anything close to white," Brooke insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "Not to the rehearsal, not to the brunch, not to any event." I put down my pen, the small click echoing in the silent room. "Why not?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "I'm not going to upstage you in a simple dress at the rehearsal dinner, Brooke. That's ridiculous." "Because," Brooke said, lowering her voice, even though only our mother was present, her cheeks flushing a deep red, "you're not pure." The room went silent, a deafening, suffocating silence. Our mother, who had been meticulously sorting the place cards, suddenly became very, very interested in them, her gaze fixed on the names as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Excuse me," I finally managed, the words barely a whisper, the shock momentarily paralyzing me. "You know what I mean," Brooke continued, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "White is for purity, for traditional values. It wouldn't be appropriate. It just wouldn't be right." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. According to Brooke, my military service, my life choices, the very essence of who I was, all of it had somehow tainted me, made me unworthy of the color white, made me an embarrassment. Later that evening, the words still ringing in my ears, I overheard Brooke and our mother talking in the kitchen. "I just don't want her to embarrass us," Brooke was saying, her voice a hushed, anxious whisper. "Liam's family is very proper, and Cassidy is just so different." "She's trying, Brooke," our mother replied, though her defense lacked any real conviction. sounding more like a placating sigh than a firm stance. Trying isn't enough, Brooke retorted, her frustration palpable. This wedding is the most important day of my life, and everything needs to be perfect. I slipped away before they could see me, retreating to my old bedroom, the one that no longer felt like mine. A heaviness settled in my chest, a familiar ache that felt uncannily like homesickness, except I was already home. That night, I lay awake on the pull-out couch, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, wondering why I had agreed to be in this wedding at all when it was so painfully clear that the real me wasn't welcome. After the white dress confrontation, I knew I needed space. I booked a room at the local Marriott, a neutral ground, a sanctuary away from my family's house, away from the constant gnawing feeling of being wrong somehow in my own skin. The anonymous quiet of the hotel room was a balm to my frayed nerves. I opened my suitcase and pulled out the garment bag I'd brought as a last resort. It was my Army service uniform, perfectly pressed, meticulously prepared. As my fingers ran over the dark blue fabric, I was transported back instantly to the day I first put it on. Basic training at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. The muggy, oppressive heat that made everything stick to your skin. The drill sergeants who seemed to exist solely to point out your failings, to tear you down, to rebuild you. The obstacle courses that left your muscles screaming, every fiber of your being aching with exhaustion. And the friendships, forged in the crucible of shared suffering, bonds that felt stronger than anything I'd known before. I hadn't wanted the military to define me, not entirely, but somewhere along the way. Amidst the sweat and the struggle, it had become the most honest, authentic part of who I was. It was where I found myself, stripped bare of all the expectations and disappointments. My first week at basic, I'd nearly quit. The constant yelling, the relentless physical demands, the absolute lack of privacy. It was overwhelming, a shock to every system. I remember calling home, desperately hoping for encouragement, for a voice to tell me I could do it. "It's not too late to come back," my mother had said, her voice laced with concern, but also, I realized now, relief. "Your father knows someone at Willow Creek Community College. You could still enroll for fall semester." Then Brooke got on the line. "Everyone makes mistakes, Cassidy," she'd said, her voice surprisingly gentle, but the words still a knife to the gut. "There's no shame in admitting this isn't for you, but it wasn't a mistake, not for me." I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face, but a fierce resolve hardening in my chest. The next morning, I ran faster, shot straighter, and stood taller than I had before. Not to prove them wrong, no, not entirely, but to prove myself right. By graduation, I stood at attention in my first uniform, stiff and proud, my chin held high as my drill sergeant pinned the insignia to my chest. My parents attended the ceremony, looking uncomfortable and utterly out of place among the other proud families. Brooke couldn't make it. She had a summer internship interview she couldn't reschedule. Another priority, another missed moment. 6 months later, I was deployed to Helmand Province, Afghanistan, for the first time. Nothing in training could have fully prepared me for the reality of it. The relentless sun beating down, scorching the earth. The dust that worked its way into everything. Your clothes, your gear, your very skin. The crushing weight of body armor in 100-degree heat. And the constant vigilance that became as natural as breathing. A low hum of awareness that never truly left you. I was assigned to a transportation unit, responsible for moving supplies through dangerous territories. We called our convoy the Dust Devils, 5 vehicles, rumbling through the desert, carrying everything from ammunition to medical supplies to mail from home. I drove the second truck, with Master Sergeant Rodriguez in command and Corporal Miller handling communications. For months into that deployment, on a routine supply run to a forward operating base, we hit the IED. I still remember the deafening, earth-shattering crack, the vehicle lurching violently, the world turning sideways in a blur of dust and fire. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Miller screaming, a raw, primal sound of terror. Smoke filled the cab, acrid and choking, and something warm and wet ran down my face, blood from a gash on my forehead. Training kicked in, a cold, precise override of instinct. I pulled Miller, who had shrapnel in his leg, from the mangled vehicle. Rodriguez was unconscious, bleeding heavily from his shoulder, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. As I dragged him clear, shots rang out, a sharp, deadly symphony. An ambush, taking advantage of our vulnerable position, the enemy emerging from the dust. What happened next still comes to me in fragments, like shattered glass. Taking cover behind the damaged vehicle, the metal still hot from the blast. Returning fire, rifle heavy and familiar in my hands, while desperately calling for backup on the comms. The searing pain when a bullet grazed my right shoulder, a white-hot burn that momentarily stunned me. Crawling back to the truck when the shooting paused, the adrenaline pumping, every nerve on high alert, retrieving the medica kit, my hands shaking but steady enough to apply a tourniquet to Rodriguez's arm. The longest 40 minutes of my life, stretched into eternity, until help finally arrived, choppers thundering overhead. I spent 2 weeks in a military hospital, recovering from my injuries. Rodriguez lost his arm, but survived, a grim testament to the brutality of war. Miller recovered fully, his leg healing, though the memory of his screams still haunted me. 2 months later, still sporting bandages, I stood at attention as a colonel pinned medals to my uniform, the Purple Heart for my wounds, and the Bronze Star with V device for valor under fire. Specialist Monroe displayed exceptional courage and selflessness, the citation read, the words a formal echo of the chaos I'd survived. Her actions saved the lives of 2 fellow soldiers while disregarding her own safety. In that moment, standing there, the weight of the medals on my chest, I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. This was purpose. This was belonging. The men and women around me didn't care about my unruly hair, or my lack of social graces, or my failure to follow conventional paths. They cared that when everything went wrong, when chaos reigned, I did what was right. I served 2 more tours after that, rising to the rank of staff sergeant. I led my own transportation team, mentored new soldiers, built a life and an identity that had nothing to do with being the disappointing Monroe daughter, and everything to do with being someone others could depend on when it mattered most. During those years, my uniform became more than just fabric and buttons. It was a declaration of who I was and what I stood for. Courage, integrity, service. Looking at it now, laid out on that anonymous hotel bed, I realized something I should have known all along. I wasn't going to find acceptance, not true acceptance, by hiding who I'd become, and I was tired, so incredibly tired of trying. I checked the time, still 3 hours before I needed to be at the church for pre-wedding preparations. I carefully hung up my uniform, took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the tension, and made a decision. I would show up as promised and do my duty as a bridesmaid. I would keep the peace through the ceremony, but I would no longer apologize for who I was or what I'd done with my life. Brooke's words echoed in my mind. You're not pure. Maybe not by her definition, but I had found something better than purity. I had found purpose. And tomorrow, one way or another, my family would finally have to see me for who I really was. The pas recruit. The morning of Brooke's wedding dawned clear and perfect, as if the weather itself was conforming to her exacting standards. Not a cloud in the sky, a crisp breeze, the kind of day a wedding planner dreams of. I arrived at the country club at the required 7 a.m. sharp, a garment bag containing my bridesmaid dress in one hand, and a much heavier, more significant bag in the other. The bridal party had a dedicated suite, plush and spacious, where hair and makeup professionals were already setting up their stations, a hive of activity. Cassidy, Brooke exclaimed when I entered, rushing over to hug me, her eyes bright with excitement, her face glowing with that pre-wedding radiance that only a bride can possess. For a moment, just for a fleeting moment, she was just my sister again, the girl who had taught me to ride a bike and patiently braided my unruly hair. I was worried you might not come after, you know. I said I would be here, I replied simply. The words steady, a quiet promise. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. I sat obediently as a stylist attached extensions to my short hair, transforming it into a cascade of loose curls that felt foreign and heavy against my neck. I closed my eyes as a makeup artist applied more products to my face than I'd used in the past year combined. Layers of foundation and blush that made me feel painted, a doll. I smiled politely as the other bridesmaids chatted about their dates for the wedding, their latest juice cleanses, and the latest drama at Jillian's spin class. Their voices a superficial hum. So Cassidy, one of them, Caitlin, I'd finally managed to learn her name, asked during a mimosa break, "Are you seeing anyone special?" "Not currently," I answered, taking a slow sip of orange juice. I declined the champagne, knowing I needed my wits about me today. "That's such a waste," Amber chimed in, her voice shrill. "I bet there are tons of hot guys in the army." "There are great people," I corrected gently, refusing to take the bait. "But relationships are complicated when you're deployed half the time." "I could never do what you do," Caitlin said, examining her freshly manicured nails, perfectly manicured and impractical. "Being away from civilization for so long. No Sephora, no Soul Cycle, no proper coffee. It sounds like torture." I bit back the response that rose to my lips, a bitter retort about how there were far worse forms of torture than going without boutique fitness classes, and I'd seen some of them firsthand. Instead, I smiled tightly, a thin line across my face, and excused myself to check my phone, needing a moment of reprieve. As the morning progressed, Brooke grew increasingly anxious, her perfectionism reaching a fever pitch. She micromanaged every detail, from the exact placement of hair accessories to the precise shade of lip gloss each bridesmaid would wear. "Cassidy, stand up straighter, but also softer," she instructed as the photographer arrived for pre-ceremony shots. "And turn slightly to the right. That angle hides your, you know." She gestured vaguely toward my shoulder, where the scar tissue was concealed beneath layers of makeup and fabric, but still, somehow, offensive to her aesthetic. I adjusted as instructed, breathing deeply through the familiar feeling of being found wanting, of being scrutinized and judged. Just a few more hours, I told myself. Do this for Brooke. Do this for peace in the family. Then came the moment that changed everything. We were lining up for the final photos before heading to the church. Brooke was resplendent in her gown, a custom creation with hand-beaded lace and a cathedral train that stretched for feet behind her. The bridesmaids fluttered around her like butterflies in our blush-pink dresses, a pastel cloud of carefully constructed beauty. "Wait," Brooke said suddenly, her eyes fixed on my right shoulder. Despite the makeup artist's best efforts, despite the layers of concealer, one of my scars was becoming faintly visible as the makeup wore off, a small pale line against my skin. "We need to touch that up," she insisted, her voice sharp with alarm. "We can't have that showing in the church photos. It'll ruin everything." "Maybe a different product," Jillian suggested, ever the practical one, though her tone held a hint of revulsion. "Or Eleanor has a beautiful pashmina that would match perfectly. You could just wear a wrap, Cassidy." They continued discussing solutions to the problem of my body, as if I weren't standing right there, as if the evidence of what I'd survived was a flaw to be hidden, rather than a testament to what I'd endured. It was the final straw. The pressure inside me, that tectonic plate of suppressed frustration that had been building for years, finally slipped. "I need a minute," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly calm. I picked up my second garment bag from where I'd stashed it in the corner of the suite, its weight comforting in my hand. "I'll be right back." I walked to the bathroom, locked the door behind me, and leaned against it, breathing deeply. 4 counts in, hold for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. Repeat, just like I'd been taught to do before missions, before entering a chaotic situation. Repeat until the noise in your head quiets. Then, slowly, deliberately, I unzipped the garment bag and removed my Army service uniform. The dark blue jacket with my rank insignia and ribbons, the lighter blue trousers with the gold stripe down the side, the crisp white shirt, the black tie, the polished shoes, gleaming under the harsh bathroom lights. I'd earned every element of this uniform, every ribbon, every badge, every scar that came with them. I changed slowly, methodically, the familiar routine grounding me, each movement a small act of defiance and affirmation. I secured my hair in a neat bun at the nape of my neck, removing the extensions with perhaps more force than necessary, pulling them free like unwanted shackles. I wiped off the excessive makeup, leaving just enough to look presentable but not painted, shedding the artificiality. I straightened the ribbons and medals on my chest, arranging them with care, each one a tangible symbol of service, sacrifice, and courage. In the mirror, Staff Sergeant Cassidy Monroe looked back at me, confident, accomplished, unashamed. This was who I really was. Not the dressed-up doll Brooke wanted in her perfect wedding photos, not a hidden version of myself, but a soldier who had faced death and saved lives. "You're not pure," Brooke had said. Maybe not by her definition, but for the first time in years, I felt clean, truly clean. I gathered the bridesmaid dress and the remaining accessories, folded them neatly, and placed them in the now empty garment bag. Then I squared my shoulders, lifted my chin, and opened the bathroom door. The bridal suite fell silent. An immediate, absolute silence. 5 pairs of eyes widened in perfect synchronization, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Brooke's eyes, fixed on me, were wide with shock, then disbelief. "What?" she finally whispered, her voice a strangled sound. "Are you wearing?" The silence in the bridal suite was so complete, so profound that I could hear the distant sound of guests arriving at the church next door, a muffled murmur of anticipation. Brooke set down her champagne glass with deliberate care, her movements slow, as if any sudden gesture might shatter the fragile moment, might break the illusion. "Cassidy," she said, her voice dangerously calm, a low tremor beneath the surface. "This is not the time for one of your rebellions. Go change back into your dress. Now." I stood my ground, hands clasped behind my back in parade rest, a stance so ingrained it felt like my natural posture now, a physical manifestation of my resolve. "I can't do that, Brooke," I replied, my voice steady, unwavering. "Can't or won't." Her voice rose slightly, color flooding her cheeks, a flush of anger and desperation. "Both," I replied simply, letting the truth hang in the air. The makeup was irritating my scars, and frankly, I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not to make everyone else comfortable. The other bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances, suddenly very interested in their manicures or the contents of their clutch purses, avoiding eye contact. Only Jillian moved, stepping forward to place a protective hand on Brooke's arm, her face a mask of indignation. "It's her wedding day," Jillian hissed at me, her eyes flashing. "How could you be so selfish?" Before I could respond, the door to the suite opened, and our mother walked in, elegant in her silver mother-of-the-bride dress. She stopped short when she saw me, her hand flying to her throat, a small gasp escaping her lips. "Cassidy, what's going on?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Your daughter has decided to ruin my wedding," Brooke wailed, tears now streaming down her face, glistening paths through her perfect makeup. "Look at her." Our mother looked at me, really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years, I saw confusion in her eyes, but also something else, something I couldn't quite identify. Was it fear? Understanding? "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. "I'm honoring my commitment to be here for Brooke. I'm just doing it as myself, not as a costume version of me that everyone else prefers." "That uniform," our mother began, her voice hesitant, a fragile question. "Is who I am," I finished for her, my voice clear and firm. "I've earned every ribbon, every medal, and every scar. I won't hide them anymore." The door opened again, and this time our father entered, stopping short at the tableau before him. His eyes widened when they landed on me, taking in the uniform, the medals. And to my surprise, something in his posture straightened, almost reflexively, a familiar military bearing. "Dad," Brooke appealed immediately, her voice pleading, desperate. "Tell Cassidy she has to change. She can't be in the wedding like that." Our father looked torn, his eyes moving from Brooke's tear-streaked face to my uniform and back again. A silent battle raging within him. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He walked over to me, slowly, deliberately. He examined the ribbons on my chest, his gaze lingering, and then gently touched the bronze star. "This is for valor," he said softly, almost to himself, a hint of awe in his voice. Then he looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine, with an expression I'd never seen before. It was respect. "I never knew," he whispered. "There's a lot you don't know, Dad," I replied quietly, a lifetime of unspoken words hanging between us. "Thomas," my mother exclaimed, her voice sharp with alarm. "This isn't the time for that. Brooke is right, Cassidy can't be in the wedding party dressed like this. What will people think?" "They'll think my daughter served her country with honor," my father said, his voice stronger now, resonating with a newfound conviction. "And they'd be right." Brooke made a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream of pure frustration. "This is my day, my wedding. Everything is supposed to be perfect." Just then, there was another knock, and the wedding planner poked her head in, her smile plastic, her eyes wide with barely concealed panic. 20 minutes until ceremony, everyone. We need to—" She trailed off, taking in the scene, her gaze darting between us. "Is everything okay?" "No," Brooke said firmly, wiping her tears with a furious gesture and visibly pulling herself together, regaining her composure through sheer force of will. She turned to me, her expression hardening, cold and resolute. "Cassidy, I'm only going to say this once. Either change back into the bridesmaid dress, or you're out of the wedding party. It's your choice." I had known this ultimatum was coming from the moment I put on my uniform, from the moment I decided to stand my ground. Yet hearing it spoken aloud, hearing those words from my sister, it still felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. I looked at my sister, beautiful, perfect Brooke, who had spent her entire life doing exactly what was expected of her, and who, in turn, expected nothing less from everyone else. "I love you, Brooke," I said softly, my voice filled with a profound sadness. "And I want to be part of your day, but I won't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore, not even for you." "Then you're not my maid of honor," she said, her voice like ice, sharp and unyielding. "You can sit with Aunt Carol and Uncle Frank in the back." The wedding planner looked like she wanted to melt into the floor, to simply vanish. "Should I rearrange the processional?" she asked timidly. "Yes," Brooke snapped, her resolve hardening. "Jillian will be maid of honor now. Caitlin, you'll take her place, and we'll just have 4 bridesmaids instead of 5. It's fine. Everything is fine." Nothing was fine, but there was no changing course now. I nodded once, accepting her decision, the finality of it settling over me. "I'll see you at the ceremony then," I said, gathering my things, my uniform bag feeling lighter somehow. As I reached the door, I turned back. "I really do want you to have a beautiful day, Brooke. I hope someday you'll understand." I didn't wait for a response, didn't give her a chance to say anything more. I slipped out, leaving the tense tableau behind, and made my way to the church. The ushers did a double take when they saw me, their eyes widening in surprise at the sight of a military uniform amidst the sea of formal wear. But they recovered quickly. "Family of the bride?" one asked, his voice hesitant. "Sister of the bride," I confirmed, my chin held high. His eyes widened slightly again, but he nodded, his gaze lingering respectfully on my medals. "This way, ma'am." He led me not to the back, as Brooke had decreed, but to a middle pew, where distant relatives were already seated. My cousin Chloe, 10 years younger than me, and clearly going through her own rebellious phase, judging by her purple-streaked hair, lit up when she saw me. "Cassidy, you look amazing," she whispered as I sat beside her, her eyes bright with genuine admiration. "Are those real medals?" "They are," I replied, touched by her unfiltered interest, so different from the calculated politeness I'd experienced all morning. "That's so cool," she said, leaning closer. "I've been thinking about enlisting after graduation. Mom and Dad are freaking out, but I don't know. I want to do something that matters, you know?" Before I could respond, the music changed, a grand sweeping melody signaling the start of the ceremony. We all rose as the processional began, Liam and his groomsmen entering from the side, followed by the now 4 bridesmaids in their blush pink dresses. Then, at the back of the church, Brooke appeared on our father's arm, radiant, a vision in white, despite the earlier drama. As they passed our pew, my father's eyes met mine briefly. There was something different there, a question perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Then they continued on, and Brooke became Liam's bride, without once looking in my direction. During the reception line, I stayed back, not wanting to create another scene, content to observe from a distance. But as guests moved into the grand ballroom, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find an older gentleman in a beautifully tailored suit. his posture unmistakably military despite his age, standing ramrod straight. "Staff Sergeant," he said, offering a crisp salute, his eyes twinkling. I returned it automatically, my own hand rising to my brow. "Sir." General Thomas Sterling, retired, he introduced himself, a warm smile on his face. "Liam's uncle." He paused, his gaze fixed on my chest. "Couldn't help but notice your ribbons. Bronze Star with V device." "Yes, sir, Helmand Province, 2018. He nodded appreciatively, a knowing look in his eyes. "I'd like to hear that story sometime," he said. "In the meantime, would you do an old soldier the honor of sitting at my table? Unless you have other arrangements, of course." For the first time that day, a genuine smile spread across my face, a warmth blooming in my chest. "I'd be honored, sir," I replied. The reception was held in the Blackwood Manor Club's grand ballroom, transformed by Brooke's vision into a fairy tale setting of blush pink roses, crystal chandeliers, and tables draped in ivory linen. A string quartet played softly in the corner as guests found their assigned seats, a gentle hum of conversation filling the opulent space. General Sterling proved to be excellent company, introducing me to his wife, Clara, and their adult children with the same matter-of-fact pride he might have used for his own family. I soon discovered why. Liam's uncle had served 3 tours in Vietnam and later commanded troops during Operation Desert Storm. He was a man who understood. "The military isn't just a career," he told me as we enjoyed the first course, his voice thoughtful. "It's a family. Different from blood relations, perhaps, but no less real." I nodded, my throat tight with unexpected emotion. My unit felt more like home than, well, home. Clara, his wife, a kind woman with warm eyes, patted my hand. "Family is complicated," she said wisely. "Sometimes the people who should understand us the most actually see us the least clearly." Her words resonated deeply. From our table near the back of the room, I had a clear view of the head table where Brooke sat with Liam, their parents, and the wedding party. She was smiling, laughing, apparently having put the morning's drama behind her, her focus entirely on her new husband. I was glad for that at least. Despite everything, I didn't want conflict to overshadow her day. As dinner progressed, I noticed other guests casting curious glances my way. Some were openly disapproving, particularly Patricia Hayes's friends with their pearl necklaces and judgmental whispers. Others seemed merely surprised or confused by my presence in uniform at such a formal occasion. But I didn't care. I was there, I was myself, and I had found unexpected allies. When the plates were cleared and the band took over from the string quartet, filling the ballroom with lively music, General Sterling stood and offered me his hand. "Would you honor me with a dance, Staff Sergeant Monroe?" I hesitated. "I'm not much of a dancer, sir." "Nonsense," he said firmly, a twinkle in his eye. "If you can navigate a combat zone, you can navigate a dance floor." I couldn't argue with that logic. As we moved to the dance floor, I was acutely aware of eyes following us, a silent parade of curiosity and judgment. The general was an excellent lead, guiding me through a simple waltz with military precision, his movements fluid and confident. "You've caused quite a stir," he observed, nodding subtly toward Patricia Hayes, who was watching us with thinly veiled disapproval, her lips pursed. "Not intentionally," I sighed, a small laugh escaping me. "I just got tired of hiding who I am." "Good for you," he said firmly. "Though I suspect your sister doesn't see it that way." As if on cue, Brooke appeared at the edge of the dance floor, her expression unreadable, a blend of curiosity and annoyance. Her wedding gown rustled softly as she approached us, a whisper of silk against the polished floor. "Uncle Thomas," she greeted the general with a tight smile. "I see you've met my sister." "Indeed I have," he replied warmly, his voice resonating with genuine pride. "You didn't tell me she was decorated for valor. Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Quite impressive, Brooke." Brooke's smile faltered slightly, her eyes flicking to my medals, then back to her uncle. "Cassidy has always been unconventional," she said, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Brave," the general corrected gently, his gaze firm. "The word you're looking for is brave." An awkward silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only when Clara appeared to claim her husband for the next dance. With a respectful nod to me and a kiss on Brooke's cheek, the general withdrew, leaving us alone on the dance floor. "You seem to be enjoying yourself," Brooke said, her voice carefully neutral, though I could hear the underlying tremor of anger. "Your wedding is beautiful," I offered, genuinely. "You look happy." "I am," she replied, her eyes narrowing as she glanced pointedly at my uniform. "Despite everything." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Brooke, I didn't do this to hurt you or steal attention. I just—" "Not here," she interrupted, glancing around at nearby guests, her voice sharp with urgency. "Meet me in the bridal suite in 5 minutes. We need to talk. Privately." Without waiting for a response, she turned and glided away, stopping to accept congratulations from guests as she passed. A perfect bride once more. I waited a few moments, letting the adrenaline subside, then made my way to the bridal suite, preparing myself for another confrontation, another round of accusations. The suite was quiet, a stark contrast to the noise of the reception. The afternoon light, muted by the heavy drapes, cast long shadows across the scattered evidence of the morning's preparations: discarded hairspray cans, forgotten lipstick tubes, a solitary champagne flute. Brooke entered shortly after me, carefully closing the door behind her, the soft click echoing in the stillness. "You embarrassed me," she said, without preamble, her voice trembling slightly, raw with emotion. "In front of Liam's family, in front of everyone." "That wasn't my intention," I replied, my voice calm, resolute. "Then what was your intention, Cassidy? To make some kind of statement, to prove a point?" "To be myself," I said simply, for once. "To be present as who I really am, not who everyone wants me to be." Brooke laughed bitterly, a hollow, mirthless sound. "And who decided showing up in uniform was appropriate for a formal wedding?" "The same person who decided I wasn't pure enough to wear white," I countered, my calm beginning to fray, a sharp edge entering my voice. "You've been trying to hide who I am since I enlisted, Brooke. You've been ashamed of me." "That's not fair," she protested, her composure finally cracking. Tears, real tears, spilled down her cheeks, streaking her makeup. "I wasn't ashamed. I was scared. Do you have any idea what it was like waiting for the phone to ring, dreading that it might be someone telling us you were dead?" Her words caught me off guard, a sudden, unexpected blow. "What?" I asked, completely taken aback. "Every time you deployed, Cassidy, I couldn't sleep," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion. "I had nightmares about men in uniform showing up at our parents' door, delivering the worst news. I checked the casualty lists every morning, terrified of seeing your name, and you seemed so cavalier about it all, like the danger didn't matter." I stared at her, seeing my sister in a new light, a fragile, vulnerable light. "I didn't know," I said softly, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "How could I? We never talk." "Not really." She sank onto a nearby chair, careful of her dress, her shoulders shaking. "And then you came home with those medals, and suddenly Dad was looking at you with this pride he never showed for any of my achievements," she continued, her voice raw. "Do you know how that felt? I did everything right, everything expected of me, and it was never enough to make him look at me the way he looked at you this morning." The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd thought Brooke looked down on my choices because they didn't fit her idea of success, her meticulously planned future. I never considered she might have been jealous, or, even more profoundly, scared. "I'm sorry," I said softly, sitting across from her, the formal distance between us dissolving into something more intimate. "I never meant to make you feel less valued. And I didn't wear my uniform today to steal attention or to make Dad proud. Not really. I wore it because it's who I am now. Just like this wedding, this life you've built. It's who you are." Brooke wiped at her tears, careful of her makeup, a small, weary sigh escaping her. "You know what the worst part is?" she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Part of me has always admired your courage, your certainty about your path. I've never been certain about anything except what other people expected from me." "You've built a beautiful life, Brooke," I said, looking around the elegant suite. "A testament to her choices, one that makes you happy, I hope." She nodded slowly, a tentative movement. "I do love Liam, and I'm good at my job, but sometimes I wonder what it would be like to make choices based on what I want, not what looks best, not what's expected." "It's never too late to start," I offered, a small smile tugging at my lips. A genuine smile tugged at her lips. a glimmer of the old Brooke peeking through. Says the woman who blew up her sister's wedding by changing dress codes at the last minute. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine bubbling sound at her unexpected humor. I guess that's one way to look at it. For a moment, we were just sisters again, the way we used to be, before expectations and choices drove us apart. I still think you could have warned me, Brooke said. But the edge was gone from her voice, replaced by a wry acceptance. And you could have not called me impure, I countered, the memory still stinging. She winced. I shouldn't have said that. I was stressed and taking it out on you. I know the feeling, I admitted, a shared understanding passing between us. Brooke stood, smoothing her dress. We should get back. People will notice we're both missing. I nodded, rising as well. At the door, she paused and turned to me. For what it's worth, Cassidy, she said, her voice quiet but sincere. I am proud of you, even when I don't understand your choices. And I'm proud of you, I replied honestly, the words coming easily, truly felt. Even when I don't understand your color schemes. She laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that reminded me of our childhood, of shared secrets and whispered jokes. Come on, soldier, she said, a playful light in her eyes. I believe you owe me a dance at my wedding. We returned to the reception together, and when the band played the next song, Brooke pulled me onto the dance floor, where Liam was waiting with our father. The four of us danced together, awkwardly at first, then with increasing ease as the music carried us along, a silent, unspoken truce settling between us. Later, during his toast, my father surprised everyone, perhaps himself most of all. Today we celebrate not just the union of Brooke and Liam, but the strength of family, he said, raising his glass, his voice clear and resonant. Brooke has always been our perfect daughter, organized, dedicated, and capable of creating beauty wherever she goes. He smiled at her, a profound tenderness in his gaze, then turned to where I sat, his eyes finding mine across the crowd. And Cassidy, he continued, his voice softer but no less firm, has shown us what courage looks like, both on the battlefield and off it. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled guests. I'm more proud of both my daughters than I have words to express. As applause filled the room, a warm, resonant wave of sound, Brooke's eyes met mine across the crowd. Something had shifted between us, something profound. Not healed completely, not yet, but definitely beginning to mend. It was a start, a real, honest start. In the morning after the wedding dawned, and I came downstairs to find my parents having coffee in the kitchen, a quiet hum settling over the house. They looked up when I entered. My mother's smile tentative, a hint of unease still lingering in her eyes. My father's gaze, however, was more direct, more open than it had been in years. Good morning, I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot, the aroma filling the comfortable space. Sleep well? Better than I expected, I admitted, sitting across from them at the kitchen table. A silence fell then, not entirely uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken words, with years of distance. Finally, my mother reached across the table and tentatively touched my hand. Your uniform, she said hesitantly, her voice soft. It's impressive, Cassidy. Coming from her, this was monumental. Thank you, I replied, the words a gentle acknowledgement. We never really asked, my father added, his gaze earnest. About your service, about what you've done, what you've experienced. You never seemed to want to know, I gently rebuked, not accusatorily, but simply stating a fact. He nodded, accepting the quiet truth. We were afraid, I think, he admitted, his voice low. It was easier to pretend you had a normal job than to acknowledge the danger, to acknowledge what you were truly doing. And my mother added softly, her eyes welling up slightly, we didn't understand your choice. We still may not fully understand it. But we're trying, Cassidy. We really are. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. It was Brooke and Liam, stopping by before leaving for their honeymoon. Despite the emotional turbulence of the previous day, Brooke looked relaxed and happy, her arm linked through her new husband's, a radiant glow about her. We wanted to say goodbye before we left for Bora Bora, she explained as we gathered in the living room. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in years, touching on wedding highlights and honeymoon plans, a newfound lightness in the air. When Liam excused himself to take a business call, even on my honeymoon the office can't survive without me, he joked, Brooke took the opportunity to pull me aside. About yesterday, she began, uncharacteristically hesitant, her usual confidence replaced by a rare vulnerability. It's okay, I assured her, a small smile playing on my lips. We said what needed saying. Not everything, she corrected, taking a deep breath. I'm sorry, Cassidy, not just for what I said about the white dress, but for not seeing you, the real you, for so long. Her eyes were sincere, brimming with regret. I had this image of who my little sister was supposed to be, and when you chose a different path, I felt like I'd lost you somehow. I'm still me, I said, a soft smile. Just an evolved version. Brooke smiled. A braver version, she corrected. A hint of playful teasing entering her voice. According to Uncle Thomas, he couldn't stop talking about you at the after-party. I think you've made a fan for life. He's a good man, I agreed. Liam's lucky to have him as an uncle. And I'm lucky to have you as a sister, Cassidy, Brooke said. The words clearly difficult for her to say, but no less sincere for it. Even when you're being impossibly stubborn. It runs in the family, I pointed out. And we both laughed. A small moment of genuine connection, a fragile bridge built between us. When Brooke and Liam left for their honeymoon, something had shifted in our family dynamic. The change wasn't dramatic or complete, not a sudden magical healing, but it was real. It was a crack in the wall of misunderstanding that had separated us for so long. A beginning. Over the following months, I returned to my unit with a new sense of peace. I'd stood my ground, been true to myself, and somehow, against all odds, begun to bridge the gap with my family rather than widen it. My mother started sending care packages with actual things I needed. Good coffee, durable socks, protein bars, instead of the feminine products and fashion magazines she'd sent before. My father began asking real questions about my work, listening to the answers without flinching when they weren't pretty, when they spoke of hardship and danger. Small steps, perhaps, but profoundly meaningful ones. 6 months after the wedding, Brooke came to visit me at Fort Liberty. It was her first time on a military base, and she looked comically out of place in her designer sundress and wedge heels, a splash of high fashion in a utilitarian world. This isn't what I expected, she admitted, her eyes wide with surprise as I showed her around. It's so normal. What did you expect? Barbed wire and drill sergeants yelling at everyone? Kind of, she laughed. A genuine, open sound. Yes, movies have a lot to answer for. I introduced her to my friends, showed her where I worked, let her see the life I'd built outside of Willow Creek. She asked questions I never thought she'd ask, listened to stories I never thought she'd want to hear, truly engaged with my world. At dinner in my small off-base apartment, she even helped me prepare a meal for some of my colleagues, fellow veterans who had served with me in Helmand Province. I get it now, she said later, as we washed dishes side by side. The mundane task made intimate by our conversation. Why you chose this? It's not just a job for you. These people are your family too. Different from blood relations, I quoted General Sterling, but no less real. I'm glad you found your place, Cassidy, Brooke said sincerely, her gaze meeting mine, even if it's not the place any of us expected. That Christmas, for the first time in years, I brought a friend home for the holidays, Samantha, a fellow soldier who had no family to go home to. My parents welcomed her warmly, my father especially eager to hear her stories, treating her with the respect and gratitude he had now learned to show me. Brooke and Liam joined us, bringing the joyous news that they were expecting their first child. We want you to be the godmother, Brooke told me on Christmas Eve, after everyone else had gone to bed, her voice soft with emotion. You're the strongest person I know, and I want my child to have that example in their life. I was speechless, overwhelmed by what this meant, not just the role itself, but the profound trust and respect it represented. A complete turn from the sister who had called me impure. On one condition I finally managed, a playful smile breaking through my emotion. No making the kid wear pink if they hate it. Brooke laughed, a full, joyful sound. Deal. The following spring, I was asked to speak at my old high school's career day, standing before a group of teenagers, some of whom reminded me painfully of myself at that age, uncertain, searching, longing for purpose. I shared the most important lesson I'd learned. Your worth isn't determined by how well you fit into someone else's expectations, I told them, my voice resonating with conviction. It's defined by your courage to live authentically, even when that's difficult, especially when that's difficult. After my talk, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright with questions, a familiar spark of defiance in them. I've been thinking about enlisting, she said, her voice hesitant but firm, but my parents are freaking out. They want me to go to college instead. College is a great path, I acknowledged, but it's not the only path. What do you want? To serve, she said simply, a clear, unwavering certainty in her voice, to be part of something bigger than myself. I recognized myself in her words, in her determined expression, the echoes of my own past. It won't be easy, I warned her, my voice gentle, not the service itself, and sometimes not the reactions from people who don't understand your choice. Was it worth it for you? She asked, her gaze steady, searching for reassurance. I thought about the hardships I'd faced, the physical challenges, the danger, the deep disconnect from my family. But I also thought about the lives I'd helped save, the purpose I'd found, and the person I'd become in the process, the pride in my father's eyes, the understanding in my sister's voice, the quiet strength I now carried. Without question, I replied, a profound certainty in my voice. Because at the end of the day, the hardest battles aren't fought on foreign soil, but within ourselves. And with those closest to us, those are the victories that truly define us. As I finished my talk that day, looking out at the young faces before me, I thought about how far I'd come from that confused teenager who had signed enlistment papers, partly out of conviction and partly out of rebellion. The uniform I wore now represented not just my service to my country, but my unwavering commitment to myself, to living honestly, bravely, and without apology. What's your story of standing up for yourself when it mattered most? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and being true to who you are? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength in challenging situations. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is never determined by others' expectations, but by your courage to live authentically.